Daughter laughed when she introduced me to her colleagues at the gallery opening. "This is my mom," she said, holding a glass of Chardonnay. "She paints little watercolors, retirement stuff." 63 people heard that. I was standing right beside her. But that's not the moment that changed everything. The moment that changed everything came 40 minutes later, when a man I'd never seen before walked through the front door, stopped in the middle of the room, and stared at the wall directly across from him. Not at my daughter's photographs, not at the sculptures near the entrance, at a painting that had no business being there at all. My painting. And when he turned around and asked the room who created it, my daughter's face went from confident to something I'd never seen on her before. Something close to disbelief. But to understand how we got there, I need to take you back to the year I turned 62 and the morning I finally stopped apologizing for being alive. The severance package from Holloway and Reed was 8 months of salary and a card signed by 31 people. I'd worked in their HR department for 27 years. They spelled my last name wrong on the card. Voss with 1 S. My name is Norma Voss. 2 S's. I didn't correct them. I brought the card home and put it in a kitchen drawer and didn't look at it again. My daughter Amber called that afternoon. She lived in Portland. She had a career in commercial photography in a loft apartment and a boyfriend named Derek, who worked in sustainable architecture and had opinions about everything. She called me about twice a month, usually on Sundays, usually for about 12 minutes. "So what are you going to do with yourself?" she asked. I looked around my house. 3-bedroom colonial in Naperville, Illinois. I'd bought it with my ex-husband Gary in 1998 and stayed in it after he left in 2009. Because Amber was 16 and needed to stay in her school district, Gary moved to Phoenix. He remarried. I stayed in the house with the cracked tile in the second bathroom and the basement that flooded every April. "I don't know yet," I said. "You should travel or take a class, something productive, a pause. Just don't spend all day watching TV, Mom. That's how people go downhill." She meant well. She always meant well. The way a person can mean well and still make you feel like a problem to be managed. After we hung up, I went downstairs to the basement. In the corner behind the water heater, there were 2 plastic storage bins I hadn't opened in 11 years. I pried off the lid of the first one. Inside, 12 tubes of watercolor paint, 4 brushes still in their original packaging, a wooden palette, and a tablet of cold-press watercolor paper. I'd bought them the year Gary left, thinking I would finally have time. I never touched them. I carried everything upstairs and set it on the kitchen table. I hadn't painted since high school. My art teacher, Mr. Adler, had told me once that I had an unusual eye. Not good, unusual. Like the way I saw things didn't quite line up with how other people saw them. And that was interesting. Gary had a different word for it. He said my paintings looked like something was off. Like the perspective was wrong. He said it wasn't a criticism, just an observation. I stopped painting the year we got married. I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the blank paper for a long time. Then I opened a tube of cerulean blue and started. The first painting was terrible. I knew it immediately. The proportions were wrong, the wash is too heavy. The paper buckled because I'd used too much water. I left it to dry and made dinner and came back to look at it afterward. It was still terrible, but something about the process had felt like remembering a language I'd forgotten I knew. I painted again the next morning. By the end of the first month, I had 14 paintings. Most of them were bad. 4 of them had something. I couldn't have explained what exactly, just a quality I hadn't put there on purpose, something that showed up when I stopped trying to control everything. Amber called on a Sunday. I told her I'd been painting. "Oh, that's cute," she said. "Like therapy. I've heard that's really good for people your age." Something tightened in my chest. I let it go. "How's Derek?" I asked. She talked about Derek for 9 minutes. I made notes on a grocery list while she talked. When we hung up, I went back to my painting. By the end of the 6th month, I had a problem. I had more paintings than wall space. I'd started renting a storage unit down the street, which felt absurd, but the work kept coming and I couldn't throw it away. A neighbor, Connie, came over for coffee in November and saw a canvas propped against the bookshelf in the living room. She stopped in the doorway. "Norma? Who painted that?" "I did." She looked at it for a long time without saying anything. "What are you doing with these?" she finally asked. "Nothing. I have a storage unit." She looked at me like I'd said I was keeping stray cats in there. "You need to show these somewhere." I laughed. She didn't. Connie owned a small framing shop on Washington Street. She knew people in the local arts community, which I had not known before that conversation. She made some calls. 3 weeks later, I had 15 paintings hanging in the back room of a coffee shop in downtown Naperville, called The Press. The owner, a woman named Sandra, had agreed to a 4-week show. No promotion, no opening reception. Just the paintings on the wall with small white cards listing the titles. And a price I'd chosen at random because I had no idea what I was doing. The first Saturday, a woman I'd never met bought 2 of them. She asked Sandra for the artist's contact information. Sandra texted me while I was at the grocery store. I had to sit down in the cereal aisle to process it. I called Amber that night. I couldn't help it. Someone bought 2 of my paintings today, I said. A woman I don't know. Silence. Then, from the coffee shop thing? Yes. How much? I told her. Mom, that's like $200. $250, right. Another pause. $250, right. Another pause. I mean, that's nice. People buy decorative art for their homes all the time. It doesn't really mean anything about the work itself, you know? It just means it matched someone's couch. I heard my own breathing for a second. You're right, I said. Probably. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just being realistic. The art world is incredibly competitive. People spend their whole lives in MFA programs and still don't sell work. You've been doing this for 6 months. I know. I just don't want you to get your hopes up and then be disappointed. She said this with genuine concern in her voice. That was the part that made it harder. She wasn't trying to wound me. She just didn't see a reason to believe in me, and she wasn't hiding it. Thanks for calling, she said. I have to run. Derek and I are doing a gallery opening tonight. His friend is showing new work. Have a good time, I said. I hung up and went to the basement and brought up 6 more canvases and arranged them against the walls of the living room, and stood there looking at them until it got dark outside. The coffee shop show ended. Sandra asked if I wanted to keep the paintings up for another month. I said yes. By the end of the second month, 11 paintings had sold. A woman who'd bought one of them sent me an email through Sandra. She said she was an interior designer and she'd like to commission a piece for a client. She asked for my rates. I didn't have rates. I spent 3 hours researching what working artists charged for commissioned work. Then I sent her a number that was higher than I thought was reasonable, expecting her to say no. She said yes without negotiating. Connie started texting me links, local art competitions, regional shows, an organization called the Illinois Watercolor Society, which I hadn't known existed. I submitted 3 paintings. 2 were accepted into a group show at a gallery in Chicago's River North neighborhood. I drove into the city alone on a Tuesday to drop off the paintings. The gallery coordinator, a young man in his 20s named Marcus, unwrapped them carefully and held them up one at a time under the track lighting. These are interesting, he said. Good interesting or bad interesting. He looked at the second one for a long time. The perspective is unusual, like you're looking at something from a vantage point that shouldn't be possible. Mr. Adler's words. Unusual eye. Gary's words. Perspective wrong. Same observation, different lens. Thank you, I said. We don't say that to everyone, he said. I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly. More like location. Like I knew where I was. Amber called that Sunday. I told her about the Chicago show. Huh, a pause. River North is a real neighborhood for galleries. I'm surprised they accepted you. I waited to feel something sharp. It came and went. When is it? March 15th. Derek and I might actually be in Chicago that weekend, weirdly. We're going to look at a project site. I'll see if we can stop by. She didn't stop by. She texted on the 16th. Sorry, ran long. Did your show go okay? I was already home by then. Both paintings had sold. The gallery had asked if I had more work. I typed back. It went well. Talk soon. I put my phone down and opened a new tube of burnt sienna I'd been saving and started something new. The gallery in River North was called Frame & Co. and they asked to represent me on a limited basis. Limited meant they'd show my work in group exhibitions and reach out when they had buyers asking for a specific aesthetic. It wasn't exclusive, it wasn't a solo show, but it was something, and I said yes. The next year moved differently than any year before it. I painted every day. I turned the 3rd bedroom into a studio, pulled out the guest bed, put in a long table and proper lighting. I started keeping a journal of each painting. What I was trying to do, what happened instead, what surprised me. The surprises were always the best part. A woman named Harriet, who bought a painting from Framing Co., sent me a card in the mail. A physical card, handwritten. She said she had it hung in her bedroom and looked at it every morning. She said it made her feel like someone understood something about the particular quality of early light that she'd never been able to put into words. And she'd stopped thinking anyone else felt it too. I read that card 4 times. Then I cried at my kitchen table, which I was becoming comfortable doing. I forwarded a photo of it to Amber with a message. Someone sent me this in the mail. Her response came 2 days later. That's sweet. People really connect with visual art, don't they? Like it had nothing to do with me specifically. I filed the card in a box I kept on my studio shelf. I started keeping all of them there. Marcus called from Frame & Co. in the fall. He was excited, which was unusual for him. He'd been approached by someone from a larger gallery in Scottsdale, Arizona, a woman named Catherine Wells, who ran a gallery with a national client list. She'd seen my work in a touring group show and wanted to know if I had representation. You don't, he said, which works in your favor. She wants to come to Chicago. She wants to see the full body of work. I have a storage unit full of paintings, I said. Perfect, he said. Catherine Wells drove up from Chicago O'Hare on a Wednesday morning. She was about 60 herself, silver-haired, came to my house on a folding chair I set up in the storage unit with a cup of coffee I'd brought in a thermos. She went through 47 paintings in 2 hours without saying much, just looking, taking her time. Afterward, she sat down and said, I've been looking for this kind of work for 3 years. I have collectors who specifically want what you're doing. Older female artists, American regionalism, something that doesn't look like it was made for Instagram. She named a number for an exclusive representation deal. I had to ask her to repeat it. She repeated it and watched me without smiling. I signed with her 2 weeks later. The commission started coming from Scottsdale, then from clients in Dallas, in Denver, in New York. Catherine managed everything I couldn't manage myself. Pricing, logistics, documentation, the business side of a business I hadn't meant to start. I started making more money from painting in 12 months than I'd made in my last 3 years at Holloway and Reed combined. I stopped checking the balance in my checking account compulsively. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to. Amber called on a Sunday in October. She was doing a gallery show in Portland, a series of commercial photography she was proud of. She wanted me to come. I flew out. I sat in the front row at the opening with Derek's mother and 2 of Amber's college friends. Amber moved through the room in a black dress, shaking hands, laughing with collectors. She was good at this. She was talented and I was proud of her. After the room cleared out, she found me by the wine table. So what did you think? She asked. It's strong work, I said. And I meant it, she smiled. I might have a corporate client that could be worth 6 figures if this goes well. That's wonderful. She asked about my drive from the airport, whether the hotel was okay, whether I needed Derek to help with my bag. She did not ask about my work. She never did, really. It had become a thing neither of us mentioned directly. I was her mom who painted. She was the one with the real career. Derek drove me to the airport the next morning. He was polite, asked about Illinois, talked about his current project, mentioned Amber's work 3 times. He did not ask about mine. I looked out the window at the highway and thought about a painting I wanted to start when I got home. 3 months later, Amber called on a Tuesday, which was unusual. Hey, so I need a favor. A big one. Something in her voice made me set down my coffee. Derek and I are doing a joint show, his architectural work and my photography at the Meridian Gallery here in Portland. It's a big deal, Mom, the biggest space I've ever shown in, and I'm coordinating the whole thing myself because the gallery coordinator they usually use is out on medical leave. I see, I said. I need help. Logistics stuff. I need help. Logistics stuff. I know you were good at that, the HR stuff, organizing. Can you come out? Just for 2 weeks before the show? I'll pay for the flights. I looked at my studio. I had a commission due in 6 weeks. Catherine had mentioned an important collector coming through Scottsdale who wanted to see new work. I've been pushing myself to have 4 new pieces ready. 2 weeks is a long time, I said. I have a deadline. Mom. Our voice shifted. I'm asking. This is important to me. This could change our whole trajectory. The old feeling. The one that had been running since she was born, probably. The pull to make her okay. All right, I said. I'll come. I called Catherine and moved 2 calls. I put the new paintings on hold. I booked a flight. The 2 weeks in Portland were long. Amber had binders. She had a vendor spreadsheet with 42 rows and she sent it to my email without explaining what she needed me to do with it, so I started making calls. The printer for the exhibition catalog. The caterer for the exhibition. The lighting company that was coming in to install additional track lighting for the show. I was on the phone 4 hours a day and on my laptop for another 3, cross-referencing, confirming, sending follow-up emails. Derek was around the apartment during all of this. He was friendly enough, but one afternoon he said, "It's really nice that you could come help. Amber's under so much pressure with the real work." He gestured toward the stack of print proofs on the counter. The real work. While I was making his caterer calls, Amber came home that night, exhausted and grateful, and didn't ask me how my day had been. She showed me mock-ups of the exhibition layout on her laptop. Her photography was strong, genuinely strong. I told her so. "Derek's installation is going to be the centerpiece, though," she said. "His sketches are incredible." I nodded. She went to bed. I sat in the guest room and sent an email to my publisher, who was producing a catalog of my year's work, and told her I needed 2 more weeks on the proofs. She wrote back quickly. She said that was fine, but that Catherine had flagged some collector interest that was time-sensitive. I wrote back, "I know. I'll be home soon." I was on the phone with the caterer the next morning when I heard Amber and Derek talking in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but the apartment was small. "She's been great," Amber said. "She has," Derek agreed. A pause. Then Amber's voice, lighter. "It's good she has something now. Remember when she was just kind of adrift? After the layoff, she was just lost. The painting thing has been good for her. Like a purpose, you know? Like a purpose. Like I'd adopted a hobby to fill the empty hours." I stood in the hallway holding my phone. I didn't say anything. I went back to the guest room and closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. I thought about the card from Harriet. The 47 paintings Catherine had gone through. The commission checks deposited in an account I'd opened specifically for art income, because my regular account couldn't hold all of it. Adrift. Just lost. There were 2 more days before the show. I had a seating chart to finalize, and a catering confirmation to send, and a lighting company that still hadn't given me the final electrical specs. I did all of it. The night of the show, I wore a charcoal blazer I bought at a boutique in Chicago the previous spring. Something about the cut made me stand a little straighter. Amber saw me when I arrived and said, "You look nice, Mom," without really looking at me. 200 people came through Meridian Gallery that evening. The space was large, white-walled, dramatic. Amber's photography filled one wing. Derek's architectural sketches and scale models filled the other. It really was impressive. I walked through slowly, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching people stop and react. I found a chair near the back and sat for a while. Let the crowd move around me. About an hour into the evening, the front door opened and a man came in. 60, maybe 65, in a dark jacket. He came in the way some people do, without looking around at all. Like he already knew where he was going. He stopped in front of Amber's photography wall and looked for a few minutes. Then he turned and walked toward the back of the room where a few additional pieces had been hung. He stopped. He stood perfectly still. He was looking at a small painting that Amber had hung in the far corner of the back wall. A piece she'd asked me to bring from home, she'd said, because there was extra wall space, and she thought it would be nice to have something there. My painting. One of the early ones, from the second month. The one Connie had seen in my living room. I had forgotten she'd asked me to bring it. The man stood in front of it for a long time, long enough that people near him started to notice. He tilted his head. He stepped back. He stepped closer. Then he turned to the room and said in a voice that carried, "Who painted this?" The room quieted. Amber was across the space. I saw her look toward the back wall, then at the man, and her expression shifted in a way I couldn't quite read. "My mother painted it," she said. Her voice was careful. "She's actually here tonight." The man looked around the room. "Where?" I stood up from the chair in the back. He crossed a room in about 15 steps. He held out his hand. "My name is Arthur Bellamy," he said. "I'm the acquisitions director for the Museum of Contemporary American Art in New York." The woman next to me made a sound. "I've been looking for the person who made this painting for 8 months, he said. "We acquired one of your pieces through a traveling group show. We didn't have a proper contact, and we've been trying to track down the original artist through 3 different channels." He looked at me steadily. "You're Norma Voss?" I said yes. We want 4 more works for our permanent collection, he said, and we want to do a feature in our spring catalog. We've already begun conversations with Catherine Wells, who I understand represents you. She mentioned you were in Portland this week and I took a risk you'd be here. I could hear Amber behind him. She'd moved closer. A permanent collection, she said. Her voice was different. Arthur Bellamy didn't turn around. He kept looking at me. We also have a partnership with a major collector in Connecticut, he said, who is specifically interested in commissioning a series of 6 works directly from you. This is something we'd want to move on quickly. He named a number for the commission series. I heard Amber exhale. Norma, he said. The reason that painting stopped me was the same reason our acquisition committee voted unanimously to purchase the first one. There is a quality of observation in your work that we're not seeing from artists half your age. You see something that other people have stopped seeing, or never learned to see in the first place. Someone nearby started clapping. Then more people. I didn't look around. I looked at Amber. Her face was something I'd never seen before. Not quite embarrassment. More like recognition. Like a fact she'd known abstractly had just become real and she wasn't sure what to do with it. Derek was beside her now. He looked at the painting on the back wall and then at me and didn't say anything. Arthur handed me his card. I'd like to set up a call with you and Catherine as soon as possible. The catalog has a hard deadline and we don't want to lose the production slot. Of course, I said. He moved toward the door. The room was still buzzing. A woman I didn't know asked if I was really the one who made the painting in the corner. 2 other people turned around. Someone asked when my next show was. Someone else said they'd been following my work through Frame & Co. for almost a year. I answered the questions. I shook hands. I accepted a business card from an interior designer who said she had a client who'd been looking for exactly this kind of work. After about 20 minutes, the crowd began to thin. Amber appeared at my elbow. She didn't say anything for a moment. Just stood there. Mom, she finally said. I had no idea. I know. I mean, a museum collection. New York. She shook her head. I didn't know it had gotten to that level. You never asked, I said. Not harshly. Just factually. She flinched, which was not something I'd seen her do very often. I know I didn't. She looked at her own photography on the wall. I think I assumed. She stopped. I don't know what I assumed. That it was retirement stuff, I said. Your words. She closed her eyes for a second. Yeah. We stood there for a moment. Derek had gone to talk to someone across the room. It was just us. I'm sorry, she said. I genuinely am. You were trying to tell me and I wasn't listening. She looked at me. I was doing to you what I hate when people do to me. I thought about that. It was a more honest thing than I'd expected her to say. What do you need from me? She asked. Going forward, what do you actually need? It was a better question than I expected. I thought before I answered. I need you to ask. I said. When we talk, ask me about my work. Not just to be polite. Actually ask. And if I say I have a deadline, I need you to hear that the way you'd want me to hear it when you say it. She nodded. Okay. And I need Derek to understand that when I'm making calls for your show, it's not because I have nothing else going on. It's because I chose to help you. There's a difference. Her jaw tightened a little, then she nodded again. He doesn't always think before he speaks, she said. No, I agreed. He doesn't. Another silence. Not a bad one. I'm proud of you, she said then. Her voice cracked slightly. I should have said that a long time ago. The paintings they're really good, Mom. I can see why he stopped. Thank you, I said. And I meant it. She hugged me. A real one. Not the kind you give at airports. Derek came back and shook my hand and said, we should get dinner sometime. You can tell me more about the work. I feel like I've been missing something. I said that sounded good. I wasn't sure yet whether it would be, but I said it. I took a car back to the hotel at 10 o'clock. Amber offered to drive me, but I said I wanted the walk to clear my head. Which wasn't quite true, but also was. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and looked at Arthur Bellamy's card, Museum of Contemporary American Art. The address was on West 67th Street in New York. I thought about the storage unit in Naperville. I thought about the afternoon I sat in the cereal aisle after Sandra texted me. I thought about Harriet's card in the box on my studio shelf. My phone showed 12 missed calls. Catherine. Arthur's assistant. Marcus from Frame & Co., a reporter from a Portland arts blog who'd been at the show. I'd look at those tomorrow. One text from Amber. Call me when you land back home. Not because anything is wrong. Just to talk. I set the phone down. I thought about a painting I'd been trying to start for 3 weeks and couldn't quite get the light right in. Something about the angle of it. Something I was seeing but not capturing. I thought I knew now what was missing. I turned off the light and went to sleep. The flight home was on a Thursday morning. I was back in Naperville by noon. I carried my bag inside, made coffee, walked upstairs to the studio. The half-finished canvas was on the easel where I'd left it. My phone buzzed. Amber's name. I looked at the canvas, at the light coming through the studio window, that particular flat Midwestern light that I'd been trying to paint since the beginning and never quite gotten. I pressed the button to let it go to voicemail. I picked up my brush. I'd call her back in an hour when I'd figured out the light. She'd understand. Not yet, maybe, but she would. We were going to figure out how to do this differently, and that was worth something. For now, the canvas was waiting. I mixed a color I didn't have a name for, somewhere between gold and gray. Put the brush to the paper. The light came out right on the first try. I've thought a lot about that evening since. About the woman I was when I opened those bins in the basement and found the paint I'd let sit for 11 years. About what I was waiting for. Permission from someone. From Gary, who'd been gone for years. From Amber, who had her own life to run. From a world that wasn't paying the slightest attention to what Norma Voss was doing with her afternoons in Naperville. No one was going to give me permission. That was the thing I learned. Not at 62, not at 63, not ever. If I'd waited for someone to tell me I was allowed, I'd have waited until there was nothing left to wait with. The storage unit has 49 paintings in it now. The new ones, the ones not yet promised to anyone. I go there sometimes just to look. Just to see what a few years of not apologizing looks like when you lay it all out. It looks like more than I thought I had in me. I'd love to know if any of this resonates with you. Were you ever told your passion wasn't serious? Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you're new here, subscribe. We're building something for people who know their best work isn't behind them. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot lately. Not in any abstract way, just in the plain honest way you think about things when you've lived long enough to watch them play out from beginning to end. When I opened those bins in my basement and found the paint I'd put away 11 years earlier, I wasn't making a grand decision. I was just a 62-year-old woman, sitting alone in a house that had gotten too quiet, doing the only thing that felt true. That's all it was. And yet everything that followed, Connie stopping in the doorway, the woman in the coffee shop buying 2 paintings, Harriet's handwritten card, Catherine driving up from the airport with her thermos of coffee. All of it came from that one afternoon when I decided to stop waiting for someone to tell me I was allowed. That's the thing nobody talks about, how much of our lives we spend in a holding pattern, waiting for permission that was never anyone else's to give. I did it for decades. I let Gary's voice tell me my perspective was wrong. I let Amber's 12-minute phone calls and careful, well-meaning doubt convince me that what I was doing was probably just something to fill the hours. I believed them, not because they were right, but because believing them felt safer than finding out they were wrong and still pushing forward anyway. Amber didn't know what she was doing when she said my painting was retirement stuff. She wasn't cruel. She just hadn't looked closely enough at me, at the work, at what it actually means when someone finds the thing they were supposed to be doing all along. And here's what I've come to understand. The people who underestimate you aren't always your enemies. Sometimes they're just people who haven't been paying attention. The question is whether you're going to let their inattention define what's possible. I didn't push back loudly. I didn't argue with her. I just kept going, every morning back at the table, every painting that surprised me, every email from a reader I'd never met who said the work gave her something she'd been missing. That accumulation was quiet, but it was real. And reality has a way of showing up eventually, whether or not anyone was expecting it. Arthur Bellamy didn't walk into that gallery and find a hobby. He found 40-plus paintings worth of discipline and observation and the kind of hard-won perspective that can't be faked. He found it because it was actually there, not because I got lucky, but because I kept making it, even on the days when no one was watching, especially on those days. The moral I keep coming back to isn't complicated. Integrity means doing the work when there's no audience. Intelligence means being honest with yourself about whether what you're doing matters, not whether other people think it matters. And endurance, the kind that actually changes things, isn't dramatic. It looks like getting up and mixing paint on a Tuesday when your daughter hasn't called and your storage unit is already full and there's no particular reason to believe this one will be any different than the last. Norma from 3 years ago would not have let Arthur Bellamy's call go to voicemail to finish a painting. That's the real distance I've traveled. Not from obscurity to recognition, from someone who needed Amber's approval, to someone who could sit quietly in the back of a beautiful gallery, watching the room, and already know her own worth before anyone in that room said a word about it. That's worth more than any number anyone can put on a painting,